Let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping into the realm of cinema to look at a masterpiece that wasn't just a film, it was an act of global defiance. We're talking about Charlie Chaplin's 1940 opus, The Great Dictator. It's an absolutely fascinating look at the intersection of humor and horror, and how one man used his massive platform to challenge the darkest forces on the planet. But to really understand the profound weight of this work, we've got to anchor ourselves in the exact moment of its creation, 1940. The United States hasn't even entered the Second World War yet. Over in Europe, Adolf Hitler is at the terrifying height of his power, rapidly becoming this figure of paralyzing dread across the entire globe. And right in the face of that absolute terror, Charlie Chaplin, who is arguably the most famous entertainer in the world at the time, decides to do the bravest, most dangerous thing imaginable. He decides to laugh at him. And what makes this cultural moment even more monumental is the cinematic milestone it represented. The Great Dictator was Chaplin's very first true talkie. He'd spent years universally beloved as the undisputed king of silent films, right? But here, he completely abandons that safety net. He realizes that this exact terrifying moment in history requires him to finally, boldly speak his mind out loud.
Which brings us to Section 1, a brilliant psychological duality.
And this brilliantly illustrates how Chaplin doesn't just step in front of the microphone to give his opinion. Instead, he crafts a narrative where he plays two completely contrasting roles in the fictional nation of Tasmania. On one hand, we have the humble, nameless Jewish barber. He's suffering from amnesia from the First World War, completely oblivious to the fact that his home has been taken over by a fascist. The barber's motivations are pure and simple: survival, love for his neighbor, and basic human dignity. On the exact opposite end, you have Adenoid Heinkel, a direct and blistering parody of Adolf Hitler. Heinkel is utterly consumed by vanity and a relentless thirst for absolute power. The plot mechanics actually weave these two extremes together masterfully. You've got the barber just trying to survive in a mad world, while Heinkel is ruthlessly expanding his power. Then, through a series of brilliant, chaotic visual gags and misunderstandings, the universe bends their paths together. It ultimately leads the poor barber to be completely mistaken for the ruthless dictator himself. Section 2. The weaponization of comedy. Because tyrants, as Chaplin knew, feed entirely on fear. Chaplin understood that fundamental truth about human psychology. If you fear them, they control you. But if you mock them, you attack their very foundation. To execute this counterattack, Chaplin crafts a scene that has become absolutely legendary in cinema history. Heinkel is alone in his office with a giant inflatable globe. He doesn't march around it like some strict military commander. Instead, he performs this delicate, ballet-like dance with it. Now, what's really interesting here is how perfectly this visualizes a dictator completely blinded by narcissism. Chaplin shows Heinkel effortlessly bouncing the world off his fingertips, catching it, spinning it. He is treating all of humanity, the entire Earth, literally like a child's toy. It's an incredibly powerful metaphor for how these tyrannical figures view the world, as something that exists solely for their own amusement. And then comes the climax of the scene. Pop! The balloon inevitably bursts right in his face, leaving him crying over a deflated piece of rubber. On the surface, sure, it's a hilarious physical gag, but the profound message beneath it is unmistakable. The dreams of tyrants are ultimately fragile, totally empty, and completely doomed to burst. So what does this all mean? Well, this is the very essence of weaponizing comedy. It's about stripping tyrants of their control by reducing them to clumsy, vain, ridiculous buffoons instead of fearing them. Chaplin completely neutralized the dictator's intimidating aura. He didn't make him look like a terrifying mastermind. He made him look utterly pathetic. Let's move to Section 3, breaking the fourth wall, and see how this builds. So, that mistaken identity plot we talked about, it pushes the humble barber directly in front of a massive rally. Thousands of heavily armed soldiers are waiting for him to deliver a speech of hatred and conquest. The tension is palpable. But instead of delivering what the crowd expects, we get the ultimate metaclimax. The barber steps up to the microphones, but as he begins, it isn't really the barber speaking anymore. For the very first time in his entire illustrious career, Charlie Chaplin completely breaks character. He looks directly into the camera lens, piercing through the screen straight at the audience. He delivers this desperate, unscripted plea, directly contrasting the machinery of oppression with the human spirit. He literally begs the audience, both the soldiers in the film and the real people sitting in the theater, to reject unnatural men, what he calls machine men with machine minds and machine hearts.
He demands that we choose humor, truth, and kindness over the cold, mechanical obedience of oppression.
Just listen to the weight of these words for a second. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Through the disguise of a fascist dictator, Chaplin delivered this profound demand for empathy and universal brotherhood. He completely halted the comedy to let this immense, undeniable truth wash over a world standing right on the brink of global war.
Section 4, a plea for humanity.
So the crucial point is this. By delivering that speech, Chaplin took the absolute ugliest political reality of the 20th century and transformed it into a timeless, eternal message that remains urgently relevant to us right now. The film leaves us with 3 major takeaways. First, we must constantly question the vanity of powerful figures. Second, we can never lose our humanity in the face of an increasingly mechanized world that often tries to divide us. And finally, we have to remember that the human spirit, when armed with humor, truth, and kindness, is ultimately unbreakable. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to carry with you. Looking at the world right now, with all its complexities and powerful figures, is comedy still a viable weapon against tyranny today? It's a question definitely worth asking yourself, and Chaplin's legacy is absolutely one worth remembering. Keep questioning the world around you, keep finding the humor, and thank you so much for joining us.